It amazes me that to convince black people that Donald Trump cares about them, he takes pictures with celebrities. It's amazing to me. If Donald Trump cared about black people, he wouldn't have denigrated the president with those claims of birtherism.
But part of that is starting off with Snoop Dogg and Nelly and Soulja Boy and others for their decisions to perform at events surrounding the inauguration.
DL Hughley just did what most people in Hollywood are too scared to do. He called out one of hip-hop's most respected icons, Snoop Dogg. And not just over music or drama, but over something much deeper, something that touches race, politics, and authenticity. DL didn't just make a post, he made a statement. He accused Snoop of doing the exact thing he once criticized others for doing, performing for Donald Trump. Now, this story isn't just about one event. It's about history repeating itself. It's about what happens when the culture that built you starts questioning whether you've sold out. And it's also about the complicated world of the music industry, where loyalty, money, and reputation collide in ways that blur all the lines. So sit back, because we're breaking down everything: DL Hughley's viral call-out, Snoop Dogg's controversial performance, the deep connections to Diddy, Suge Knight's explosive claims, and how this all ties into a much bigger story about power and image in hip-hop. It all started when DL Hughley reposted an old 2017 clip of Snoop Dogg that instantly went viral again. In that clip, Snoop mocked black artists who chose to perform at Donald Trump's inauguration. He said, and I quote, "Which one of you Uncle Tom ninjas gonna do it?" It was raw, unfiltered, and it came straight from Snoop's heart during a time when most of the hip-hop world was standing firmly against Trump's rhetoric. Snoop's words were sharp, meant to draw a line between those who stood with the culture and those who would sell out for a check or clout. Fast forward to 2025, and the internet just witnessed something nobody expected. Snoop Dogg, the same man who had once laughed at the idea of supporting Trump, hit the stage at one of Trump's events. Not just him, he was joined by Nelly and Rick Ross. The reaction online was instant. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. The same energy Snoop once threw at others for performing for Trump was now being thrown back at him tenfold. Social media lit up with outrage, memes, and disappointment. Some fans called him a sellout. Others said he'd lost touch with the culture that made him. And of course, DL Hughley wasted no time pointing out the hypocrisy. DL's post cut deep because it wasn't just a random celebrity beef. It was a cultural critique. He reminded people of his earlier statement from 2017, where he said, "It amazes me that to convince black people that Donald Trump cares about them, he takes pictures with celebrities." Back then, DL was talking about Trump meeting with people like Steve Harvey and Kanye West, trying to paint himself as connected to Black America. DL added, "If Trump cared about black people, he wouldn't have pushed those racist birther claims about President Obama." That quote aged like fine wine, because now, years later, the same pattern is repeating. Trump's back in the headlines, surrounding himself with famous black entertainers, and DL is once again pointing out that it's not about inclusion, it's about optics and control. Snoop Dogg's decision to perform for Trump shocked everyone because it clashed so hard with his established image. For decades, Snoop's been the cool uncle of hip-hop, the laid-back West Coast legend who represents authenticity, rebellion, and loyalty to the streets. He's the same guy who smoked on live TV, cracked jokes about the system, and always stood on the side of the people. That's why seeing him performing at a Trump event felt like a betrayal to many. Fans flooded social media with comments saying things like, "The man who stood with Tupac is now standing with Trump," and "Money really changes everything." Some people tried to defend Snoop, arguing that it's just business, that he was performing for the office of the President of the United States, not for the man himself. And to be fair, that's pretty much what Snoop said. In a brief statement, he explained, "I am honored to be performing for the office of the President of the United States regardless. Ain't another president asked me to perform." But for DL Hughley, and for a lot of fans, that explanation didn't hold weight. They saw it as an excuse to justify crossing a line. Especially when you remember that in 2017, Snoop was the one who said he'd roast anyone who performed for Trump. The irony was impossible to ignore. DL Hughley took that contradiction and turned it into a message about integrity, about standing by your words even when money and fame are on the line. But this story doesn't stop with Snoop and DL. It connects to something much larger, a pattern within the music industry that's been going on for decades. Recently, Suge Knight, speaking from prison, dropped some major insight into how the industry operates. In an interview, he said something that got people talking. You can't just look at Diddy in isolation.
Suge claimed that a lot of what we see today, the exploitation, manipulation, and moral compromises, are part of a system that's been in place for a long time. According to him, Diddy learned from people before him, like Russell Simmons and Clive Davis, and then repeated the same behaviors with others. Suge called it a cycle, the idea that hurt people hurt people. Those who were once victims of exploitation end up continuing the cycle, often without realizing it. He also reminded people that the casting couch isn't a myth, it's real and it doesn't discriminate. Men and women in the industry have faced pressure and abuse for decades. What Suge was saying, between the lines, is that fame and success in this business often come at a price, and sometimes that price is your principles. So when DL Hughley sees Snoop performing for Trump, he's not just seeing a concert, he's seeing a symptom of a much bigger problem, an industry where money and influence constantly test loyalty, where people who were once the voice of rebellion become part of the establishment they once criticized. Now let's talk about Nelly and Rick Ross, because they weren't spared either. Nelly went online to defend himself after the backlash, saying it wasn't about politics, it was about respect. He said, "I'm not doing this for the money, it's an honor. I respect the office, period." Nelly even mentioned that he'd perform for Biden or Kamala Harris too, basically framing it as business, not betrayal. But DL Hughley wasn't convinced. He clapped back with a statement that summed up his entire frustration. Trump propping up white supremacy isn't just his past, Nelly, it's who he still is today. To DL, performing for Trump wasn't just another gig. It was a public show of support, intentional or not, for someone whose legacy includes policies and rhetoric that have harmed Black communities. This is what makes the debate so complex. On one side, you have people saying it's just business. Artists perform for whoever pays. On the other, you have those who say hip-hop has always been about truth and resistance, and when you align yourself with power structures that historically oppressed your people, you're crossing a moral line. That's why the backlash hits so hard. For fans who grew up seeing Snoop as a symbol of realness, this move felt like watching a hero trade his legacy for a paycheck. DL Hughley also offered another perspective, one that might explain why Trump wanted Snoop there in the first place. He called it a power move. According to DL, this wasn't about music or unity, it was about optics and dominance. Having Snoop Dogg, one of Trump's loudest critics, perform at his event sends a clear message: even your heroes can be swayed. It's the same strategy Trump used years ago when he surrounded himself with Black celebrities like Kanye West, Lil Wayne, and even Ice Cube, people with massive influence in the culture. Each time, it wasn't about building bridges, it was about flexing power and legitimacy. By bringing in these icons, Trump's team could create the illusion of support within the Black community, even when the policies didn't match the photo ops. DL Hughley sees Snoop's appearance as another chapter in that strategy, and honestly, it's hard to argue with that logic. Trump didn't call back the rappers who already burned their credibility for him years ago. He called Snoop because Snoop's name carries weight, global influence, mainstream appeal, and cultural authority. Having him on that stage wasn't random, it was a calculated move. Once the video of Snoop's performance hit the internet, it spread like wildfire. Memes, edits, and reaction videos flooded every corner of social media. One user wrote, "After Snoop's Olympic moment, he thought he was untouchable. Guess not." Another commented, "When you get enough money, you'll excuse anything you do wrong, but money can't erase history." People were ruthless. They brought up his past statements, his old feuds, and even his friendships. Suddenly, everything about Snoop was being questioned, from his loyalty to Tupac to his supposed connections with law enforcement. Suge Knight even reignited an old claim that Snoop had been playing both sides since the death row days. According to Suge, Snoop lied about trying to visit Tupac in the hospital after the shooting. Suge said Snoop never even showed up, despite what he told the public. When someone like Suge, who's been part of Snoop's story from the beginning, makes those claims, people pay attention. Whether it's true or not, it adds another layer to the perception that Snoop isn't as real as he portrays himself to be.
And in a culture where authenticity is everything, that's dangerous territory. What's happening to Snoop right now isn't just about politics, it's about legacy. Hip-hop has always been about speaking truth to power. It's a culture born from struggle, resistance, and storytelling. So when someone who built their brand on rebellion suddenly aligns themselves with the same power structures they once mocked, it shakes the foundation. Snoop Dogg's facing what might be the biggest image crisis of his career. And the irony is, he's always been the one telling young artists how to move smart, how to protect their brand, how to stay real. But right now, it looks like he's the one being played, whether by politics, by the industry, or by his own ambition. In this digital age, every decision is amplified. There's no such thing as just business anymore. Every move sends a message. And that's why fans are reacting so strongly. They're not just angry that Snoop performed for Trump, they're disappointed because it feels like the man who once stood for something now stands for anything. At the end of the day, this situation forces all of us to ask some uncomfortable questions. What does it mean to be authentic in an industry built on image? Can you separate art from politics? And is loyalty to the culture more important than chasing opportunities? DL Hughley's criticism hit a nerve because it wasn't just about Snoop. It was about a pattern we've seen too many times. Artists rise up from the streets, speak truth to power, then get close to that same power and forget where they came from. Maybe Snoop didn't mean any harm. Maybe he really did just see it as a performance. But perception is everything. And right now, the perception is that one of hip-hop's biggest icons has blurred the line between rebellion and compliance. However, what makes this story even more explosive is that it isn't just about Snoop in a performance. It's about something much deeper, about how fame changes people, how money alters values, and how even the most respected figures in hip-hop can get caught up in contradictions that expose the fragility of authenticity in today's music industry. To make things even crazier, hip-hop's notorious figure Suge Knight has entered the conversation, claiming that Snoop's image has always been carefully crafted and far from as genuine as people think. So let's break it all down, from DL Hughley's viral post to Snoop's fall from grace in the eyes of many fans, and the deeper questions this situation raises about what it means to stay real in a world built on selling images. The controversy began when DL Hughley reposted a clip from 2017 that resurfaced online. In the video, Snoop Dogg can be seen openly mocking Black artists who were set to perform at Donald Trump's inauguration after he was elected president. Back then, Snoop didn't mince words. He said, quote, "Which one of you Uncle Tom ninjas is gonna do it? I'm waiting. I'm gonna roast the one of you who does it." Those words hit hard, and they resonated with many fans who viewed Trump's presidency as a symbol of division and racial insensitivity. Snoop positioned himself as someone who stood firmly against everything Trump represented. He was vocal, defiant, and unapologetically critical of anyone who associated themselves with the former president. Fast forward to 2025, and the same Snoop Dogg who called out others for selling out was now seen standing on stage at a Trump-affiliated event. The footage quickly spread across every social media platform imaginable, showing Snoop performing alongside Nelly and Rick Ross, smiling and interacting with the same type of audience he once mocked. The internet reaction was instant and brutal. Fans filled comment sections with accusations of hypocrisy, betrayal, and disappointment. Memes flooded Twitter and TikTok, with users saying things like Snoop went from calling people Uncle Toms to being one, and I guess everyone's got a price. Some even joked that Snoop was now puffing out his chest saying, "Yes, sir, I'll dance for you, sir," mocking the reversal of his past stance. For longtime fans, the move was shocking. Snoop Dogg has always been seen as the cool uncle of hip-hop, the man who could blend street credibility with mainstream success without losing his authenticity. But this felt like a betrayal to some. The same man who once rapped about not bowing to authority was now performing for the same political figure he once condemned.
It was a moment that blurred the line between business and betrayal, forcing people to ask whether Snoop's loyalty lies with his roots or with whoever can sign the biggest check. DL Hughley wasted no time in calling Snoop out. The comedian took to Instagram and reposted the 2017 clip of Snoop roasting artists who performed for Trump, letting the footage speak for itself. He didn't have to add much. The contradiction was clear as day. His caption read, "If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything," a quote that cut deep into the heart of the issue. Within hours, the post went viral, sparking heated debates online. Fans filled DL's comments with many praising him for speaking truth to power, while others accused him of stirring unnecessary drama.
But for DL Hughley, this wasn't about drama. It was about accountability. In a follow-up post, he doubled down, reminding fans that Donald Trump's track record on race hadn't magically disappeared. He wrote, "Trump's support of white supremacy isn't a thing of the past. It's still who he is." In other words, DL wasn't just questioning Snoop's decision to perform, he was questioning the moral compromise behind it. What does it mean when one of hip-hop's most respected figures, someone who once positioned himself as a voice of resistance, decides to align with the very person he called out? The post hit a cultural nerve. It reignited conversations about how fame and money can change an artist's principles. In hip-hop, authenticity has always been sacred, the idea that your words and actions must align. And for years, Snoop had built his image around being authentic. DL's post made people question if that image still held true. The comments under his video were flooded with fans saying things like, "This isn't the Snoop we grew up with," and "Guess the industry really does change everyone." The energy online was undeniable, and it wasn't in Snoop's favor. As the controversy grew, the other artists who performed alongside Snoop tried to defend themselves. Nelly, who also appeared at the event, took to social media to explain his side of the story. He said, "This isn't about money. It's an honor. I respect the office, plain and simple." Nelly argued that his decision wasn't political but professional, that he would have performed for Biden or Kamala Harris if given the chance. He saw it as just another gig. But DL Hughley wasn't having it. In another response, he reminded fans that separating the man from the office doesn't erase Trump's history. For DL, the issue wasn't about the paycheck. It was about what the performance symbolized. It was about artists lending legitimacy to a man whose political record and rhetoric have harmed communities of color for years. Some fans sympathized with Nelly's perspective, arguing that performing is just business and that artists shouldn't have to turn down opportunities because of politics. Others, however, saw it differently. They believed that, as influential figures, artists like Snoop, Nelly, and Rick Ross have a responsibility to think about how their actions reflect on the culture as a whole. To them, performing for Trump wasn't just a gig. It was a statement, intentional or not. Then came the curveball that nobody saw coming. Suge Knight decided to speak on the situation. The former Death Row Records boss, currently incarcerated, gave a phone interview where he didn't hold back. Suge claimed that Snoop Dogg has been playing both sides for years, that the image fans see is far removed from the real man behind it. He said, "The industry is a dirty game. What was done to Diddy was done to others before him. It's a cycle. Hurt people, hurt people." According to Suge, Snoop didn't just learn the game, he became part of it. Suge's words sparked even more speculation online. Some began to revisit old rumors about Snoop's alleged connections to law enforcement, theories that have floated around hip-hop for decades. Suge implied that Snoop's survival in the industry, when so many others fell, wasn't just luck, it was strategy. And that made people question whether his recent performance at a Trump event was really about money, or whether it was part of a bigger web of political and industry relationships fans will never fully understand. True or not, Suge's comments added fuel to the fire. They gave the controversy a darker edge. What if Snoop's actions weren't just hypocritical? What if they were calculated? At that point, the internet went nuclear. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, every platform was filled with people dissecting the situation.
Reaction channels uploaded hour-long breakdowns. Twitter threads connected dots between Snoop's past statements and his present choices. And fans debated whether he had simply evolved or completely sold out. Memes painted Snoop as two-faced. One popular video edit showed Snoop's 2017 clip playing next to footage of him performing for Trump, with the caption, "That's not karma, that's full-circle humiliation." Another showed clips of Snoop talking about integrity and loyalty, juxtaposed with the Trump event footage, asking what happened to the real Snoop. But some fans pushed back against the outrage. They argued that people expect too much from celebrities, that Snoop has done enough for the culture over the years to make his own choices now. They pointed out that he's 53 years old, a grandfather, and more of a businessman than a rebel. Snoop doesn't owe anybody anything, one user wrote. He's been feeding families for decades. Let him get his bag. But others fired back saying that respect in hip-hop isn't about money, it's about principle. And by going back on his own words, Snoop had crossed a line that money couldn't fix.
The truth is, this controversy goes far beyond one performance. It's about the tension between authenticity and survival in an industry that constantly demands both. Hip-hop was built on truth, on speaking for the voiceless and resisting systems of power. But over time, as artists became global brands, those lines blurred. When someone like Snoop Dogg, who built his career on rebellion and defiance, starts to align with the same establishment he once rejected, it raises the question, is it still hip-hop or has it become business as usual? Snoop's journey from the streets of Long Beach to international stardom is legendary. He's gone from death row to Disney, from hardcore gangster rap to cooking shows with Martha Stewart. That's not an easy balance to maintain. But somewhere along the way, the line between evolution and contradiction started to fade. Fans loved him for being real, but the more he evolved into a corporate icon, the more disconnected he became from the persona that made him famous. DL Hughley's post didn't just expose a moment of hypocrisy, it exposed a cultural reality that no matter how real someone once was, the pressures of fame, money, and image can rewrite their story. So now the question is, what happens next? Will Snoop respond to DL Hughley and the public criticism, or will he simply ignore it and move forward? Knowing Snoop, he might just shrug it off. He survived countless controversies before, from legal troubles to feuds to industry politics. But this one feels different. This one hits at the heart of who Snoop Dogg is supposed to be. For decades, he's been seen as untouchable, the ultimate cool figure in hip-hop who could do no wrong. But this situation has cracked that image. The same fans who once called him Uncle Snoop are now questioning whether he's still the same man who once stood for something. And in today's social media-driven world, where public opinion moves faster than facts, repairing that image won't be easy. So now the culture's left with the question, did Snoop, Nelly, and Rick Ross go too far? Or are they just playing the game the way the system's always been designed? A system where everyone has a price, and loyalty only lasts until the next opportunity comes along. Whatever your opinion is, one thing's for sure, the conversation isn't going away anytime soon. DL Hughley's post reignited something bigger than a celebrity feud. It's a reminder that hip-hop isn't just about beats and rhymes. It's about integrity, truth, and identity. And right now, those values are being tested in real time. So what do you think? Did Snoop and the others fumble their legacy for a check? Or is it unfair to expect artists to carry political burdens with every move they make? Drop your thoughts down in the comments. Let's talk about it. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep dive into hip-hop culture and the stories behind the headlines. Until next time, stay informed, stay grounded, and as always, stay real.